Here's a video about minimum wage, specifically minimum wage jobs, and the problem that I have with that. Personally, the problem with it is, and I've only worked minimum wage jobs other than some yard work that I got paid 20 an hour for. But the problem was, yeah, it was 20 an hour because what? It was only once in a blue moon. There was 1 month where I did it like a few times that month, but it wasn't every day. It wasn't 5 days a week. It wasn't consistent. So yeah, you're getting more money, but you're not doing it as much. So the problem with these minimum wage jobs is that you can't, people that think, go get a job, minimum wage doesn't matter, blah, 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 and just ignore the fact that the rent costs a certain amount and all this other stuff and just ignore it. It's just like, really? It annoys me because it's like, people expect me to take that advice like it's somehow some wonderful thing. Like, go work a minimum wage job that you can't even get to because you have no car. And this thing of, well, it doesn't matter. Well, it kind of does matter because I've had employers ask me if I have reliable transportation. They might have asked me, if I remember correct, some of them might have asked me if I actually had a car, I don't remember. But they definitely asked if I had transportation. So, and they're not talking about a train or a bus. They're talking about a car. So people need to get over it, okay? It's, yeah, oh, you just think you need a car. No, okay? You go try to get a retail job. They might not ask you if you have a car, but how are you going to get there? At the end of the day, if you can't get to the place, I don't care if they ask you if you have a transportation or not. If you can't get to the place, you can't maintain the job. If you can't maintain the job, it's pointless because minimum wage, you have to work full-time, minimum wage, every freaking day to actually somewhat, maybe, possibly even get anywhere, if you're going to get anywhere at all. So it's horrible advice to give people. This nonsense of, you don't need certain things because we think you don't, or blah, 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 blah. You know. It really annoys me. So, but the whole thing with minimum wage is the problem is the pay you're getting doesn't match the expenses of the reality of the existence that you live in. You know, if you're making 15 an hour and everything else costs twice as much or 30 times as much than what you're earning, it's just absurd to think it doesn't matter, blah, 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 it's a start, blah, blah. I've always heard these things from people, it's a start. I'm thinking to myself, first of all, the federal minimum wage has been $7.25 for the past, since 2011, I think, or maybe more than that, maybe before that even, if I remember right. The point is, it's been that for a very long time. If I'm thinking about this correctly, from last time I checked, pretty sure the federal minimum wage is still $7.25, and that's been like that for a pretty long time, if I remember right. But then you say, oh, but there's whatever other little variations, right? But it's like, I think the problem is people don't want to face reality. People don't like facing reality, in my opinion. They don't like seeing the world for what it is and saying, the reality is, you know, if someone wants to go do that and they realize they're not probably going to be able to do much, if anything at all, then at least you realize what you're doing. It's like smoking. If someone smokes, if they're, you know, whatever, if I want to smoke, at least if I know what I'm doing, like, oh, smoking is bad for my lungs. At least I know what I'm doing, though. But to just be like, oh, I think that smoking's good, somehow healthy, and it's somehow going to help me, and being all delusional about it, like it's somehow good. It's like, if I thought smoking was good for me, okay, that's the problem I have, is people like pushing these things onto people, or people like trying to push stuff onto me and trying to say, I have to think like they think. But the way they think is based off of, or what they're saying is based off of what they were taught by someone else. But the problem is people were taught that in a different time period. In 1950, you could go do that stuff, and now people expect people in this day and age to do the same thing because they have this idea that, well, I was taught that. Yeah, you were taught that 40 freaking years ago. It's absurd to think that people are going to do the same thing in this day and age. It's actually, in my opinion, delusional. Because people don't like to look at the world and say, oh, actually, there's things that you can't really do anymore. Oh, people live with their parents. This whole thing about people living with their parents, right? It's like, blame it on the people living with their parents. Why don't you blame it on the stupid fact that people get minimum wage jobs and they can't get anything else? And the fact that everything's more money than it used to be in 1950 or whatever. Stop blaming it on, I'm not saying certain people might be lazy or whatever else. My personal situation is I'm not lazy, okay? I'm not being lazy. I have no car. I've tried getting jobs. I've worked other jobs. Even when I worked at this camp 40 hours a week, I didn't have money to do anything. I had a little bit of money that I had to buy food with, and that is all I pretty much bought. I didn't buy anything other than food except maybe earbuds, some cheap earbuds or something, or, you know, I didn't have money to really do anything. So like this thing like, oh, you just go work and you're gonna have something. It just annoys me because I have done that. I was making $10 an hour. How are you supposed to get somewhere when you're making $10 an hour? And I was working 40 hours a week, so and yes, I was only getting paid for the half the time because half of it was housing, half of it was pay. But the point is, if working in and of itself was the solution to people's situation, then how come the people that work the hardest a lot of the time have the least amount of money, and some of the people that don't do a lot of work necessarily, they seem to have more money? That's my question to people. Okay, I worked extremely hard. I worked ridiculously hard, probably harder than some of these other people at this camp that I worked at. I didn't get paid more money. They didn't say, oh, we're going to pay you more because you're working harder. The only time they even mentioned paying me more, outside of the little increase that they were going to do after like 4 months or whatever it was, besides that little increase that was part of the whole agreement or something from working there. Like if you worked at the camp, after like a few months you would get a little bit more money. Besides that, the only time they offered to even consider paying me more money was when I was saying I was going to quit or leave, or I couldn't, whatever. Or I cut the hours in half because I couldn't deal with the stress of working in that place. They didn't just do it because I worked hard. They didn't just say, oh, you work really hard. You work harder than this person over here. We're going to pay you more. They didn't care. It's about exploitation. They wanted to get as much out of people as they possibly could legally and get away with it. And people think that some corporation is going to care that you work hard. I think people are being delusional because they don't really, in my opinion, it's about getting you to be there at a certain time, doing the job. Hard work doesn't really matter. As long as you do the bare minimum, it doesn't matter how hard you work. In my opinion, most people, you might get a little more money from working hard, but in general, from my personal experience, I worked hard at a lot of these jobs and they didn't pay me more money for it. So this whole thing of go work hard, you're gonna get somewhere, from my personal experience, I never got anywhere working hard. I worked at this camp like a slave and they never paid me more money. They didn't pay me more money. There was times where I was literally working faster. I wasn't on the phone. I wasn't sitting there talking and having some social club like the other people, and they paid me the same amount of money. So it's just, from my personal experience, all that happens is when you work hard, it's people look at that as an opportunity to get you to do as much work as possible and give you more work to do, and just keep doing it and do it as long as they can possibly do it to exploit me, to get as much work out of me as possible. That's all that I've had from working for people. So I don't think just trying to work hard. I think if you go to a job, my personal recommendation is only do the bare minimum and that's it. Because they're paying you the bare minimum, so why should you do any more? Why should you go work more when they're not paying you more? It's just stupid, Whatever, it's the end of this stupid video.